Hey everyone, I thought I'd do a little video earlier in the morning this morning. I just got home from work. I'm on a bit of caffeine, so I'm feeling energetic. I don't really have a specific topic for today per se. I've got my notes here on a couple of videos that I've been wanting to do, and I'm not sure if any of them make up a specific video, so I might just touch on all of them briefly and see how we go. Firstly, with my training, as you can see, I'm a little bit big right now, so powerlifting training is in full effect. I've got one more week, and essentially until comp. So I've got a squat, my last squat, last bench, on Sunday. So aim for a top single at 200 if I can get it. If my body's not too broken, and then back off to maybe 185, 180, and then attempt to pause 150 bench and probably paused 145 bench. For singles, for everything, and then maybe some lateral raises and curls and stuff to finish off. In terms of diet and everything like that, been in a sort of funk psychologically with all the developments going on around me over the past few months. I'm coming out of that now a little bit, so drinking a lot less alcohol, eating a lot less junk food. So post powerlifting comp, I'll have 2 weeks to prep for a BJJ comp, which will be a little bit more serious than my last foray into the sport. So we'll be focusing on cardio for that, and obviously BJJ. I haven't done a lot in the last couple of weeks. So if I qualify for nationals, which will be sometime around October, November, the focus will be to improve body composition, improve work capacity in the powerlifting lifts in the next few months, put on a bit of muscle mass, lose a bit of body fat, while also simultaneously developing my cardiovascular system. So I'll essentially do some aerobic base work, progressing to some anaerobic stuff, and then essentially BJJ specific stuff. Competitions, I think, for no gi are around April, May, and then it's it's gi towards the end of the year. So I'll focus on that then, and no baby. So things I want to talk about today. Firstly, I've got notes for diet hacks. So these are things to help when you're dieting, to help the dieting experience, to essentially ensure you stay in a calorie deficit. So the things I have are diet sodas, caffeine, vegetables, and healthy but cheap foods. So there's a lot of misinformation that a lot of my clients read on Instagram and like those kind of sources. And so like one of the things you'll always read are diet sodas are bad for you due to any number of reasons. There'll be, the quote unquote chemical thing, artificial sweeteners cause cancer, those kind of things. And essentially the pushback is an evidence-based and logic-based one, right? So the logic-based pushback on that mentality is everything is chemicals, everything you eat is chemicals. That's a reductionist view of science in and of itself, and if you take that reductionist view, you go everything is chemicals. What I think those people mean when they criticize diet sodas is man-made chemicals, and again, so is many things that we eat. I mean, we live in an ultra high processed food environment. When you're talking even GMOs and like stuff like that, like all the fruit and vegetables we eat are GMO'd. So it's all man-made. And then there's the evidential basis of essentially studying things like aspartame and those kind of artificial sweeteners at, I believe the studies quoted something like 150 cans of diet soda a day. That's the aspartame intake that the participants studied, and it was it takes something like 150 cans in mice to get a toxicity effect, which, as the spin said to me, doesn't mean it's healthy per se, but it just means we cannot detect any significant negative. Sorry, I'm patting my cat because he's insisting on cuddles. We can't detect any kind of negative health effects from ingesting it. So what does that mean for the person who's dieting? You should essentially not have liquid calories. That's always the first thing I tell dieters to get rid of, because they're not empty calories, but they're calories that do not contribute to satiety. Satiety being feeling full. So having drinks that do taste nice are good, diet sodas namely, And then I would also suggest diet sodas that don't particularly have caffeine if you're having them at night, and then lean into them during the day for caffeine, which leads us into caffeine. So a lot of people like coffee and tea and stuff like that, and absolutely should drink it. It has a host of health benefits aside from the appetite suppressant and energy stimulating stuff. But essentially caffeine while dieting is super useful for appetite management. Come on, little Scooty. For appetite management and also providing you with energy in a calorie deficit. So the thing I usually tell with people with caffeine is big heavy dose in the morning, 5-6 o'clock as you're getting up around breakfast, sort of if you're having instant, like the 2 to 3 scoops, and then sort of around 10 or 11 per your ability to tolerate it, having another 2 to 3 scoops will help suppress appetite, give you energy, not make you feel as lethargic and stuff during. And again, black coffees. A lot of people drink milk with their coffee. If you're having 2 or 3 coffees a day at roughly, even with skim milk, 90 calories a serve basically, you're adding an extra couple hundred calories. And when you're a small girl and maybe you're dieting on 1,500 calories, why would you want to drink 200 calories when you could just take that out, add some artificial sweetener, and have a 0 or 3 calorie meal? That leads us into off the top of my head, that's really so even protein shakes, which can be an absolutely efficient way to get protein in a diet. I would suggest moving to more protein bars where possible, or protein shakes with whole meals, because then you get the satiety creating benefits of having protein, but then you also have if you're having it with your dinner meal, where you're having or even oats and things like that, or you're having some fruit and a smoothie for breakfast or something like that with a bit of protein in it, like you would have seen on my Instagram. Making vegetable smoothies and adding protein is a good way to, essentially have a liquid meal with a lot of fiber. And that leads us into fiber. And I've created a video on this before, but it never hurts to reiterate that fruit and vegetables should be the bread and butter of dieting. Maybe if you're in the lower calorie digging portion of your cutting phase, you want to prioritize green leafy vegetables, maybe over the more starchy vegetables and fruit per se. But honestly, nobody's getting fat from eating so much fruit that it blows out the calories. But it is something to keep in mind that starchy vegetables like your corns and your tomatoes and potatoes do have more calories than your kale, broccoli, spinach, bok choy, bok choy, and all those green leafies. So probably at the beginning of the diet, you want to prioritize lots of fruit and vegetables from any source, all the colors of the rainbow, because they have different, I was going to say chemicals, phytonutrients, nutrients, minerals, vitamins in the different skin color types and stuff like that. So important to get a varied variety. But the reason I say, aside from health, is that vegetables are high in fiber, the cruciferous vegetables, that is green leafy stuff like that, are hard to digest and take a long time. So every meal, whether it's, you've got your mince and you've got your chili and your rice, should have a big bowl of fruit and vegetables too. So things you can prioritize like breakfast, fruit, lunch, and the rest of the day, vegetables. So every meal, lunch and dinner, which would be your sort of meat, carb, and maybe a little thing of vegetables, should also have a side thing of vegetables. So now you start going you're having a dinner, which has your controlled calorie portions of meat and carbs, and then you're having a big bowl of vegetables with no dressing and stuff like that, because you can have a look at food labels, and the food labels are something we can talk about later on. But you generally want to find vegetables that you can tolerate. I hear most adults don't mind eating them, so definitely big bowl. And that's how you get your banquet. When you have your diet soda, so now you've got a nice delicious diet soda, a nice delicious chili, curry, mince, whatever meal with your rice, and then you've got a big bowl of vegetables, and you're having that 2 or 3 times a day. You're filling up your stomach, you're getting a little bit more full, you're able to withstand the essential hunger that comes in between each one of those things, each one of those feeding windows. If you have a small thing of oats with a scoop of protein powder, maybe a big coffee, and 1 or 2 pieces of fruit for breakfast, now you've got really substantial sort of 3 meals in a day that are not just a piece of salad and some water. It's you've got some flavorful foods that you can enjoy during the day. And that's where it gets us into something that one of my clients wanted me to talk about, was cheap options. So for my money, lean mince is like, I think Woolworths sells it the cheapest in the most abundant. So I think you can get a kilo for $10 or something. And honestly, you're going to pay about the $10 per kilo for chicken breast, mince, lean mince, and maybe lean cuts of steak. But I think the versatility of mince is where it like pays off for me. So my three core meals are spaghetti, like pasta and mince, chili, which will have like some mixed vegetables. Oh, sorry, a curry which has some mixed vegetables, and then a chili which has some beans and some diced tomatoes in it. And then I buy say 2 kilos of mince for my chili meals for the week, two kilos of mince for my curry meals, and then like I'll cook all that up. Takes me 45 minutes. Put it in 15 containers in the fridge, and I've got essentially a chili meal for lunch, curry meal for dinner, a little bit of rice with each meal. If I get my vegetable smoothie and a protein shake for breakfast, boom. A couple of pieces of fruit, maybe a bit more protein if you need it. But that's going to be the cheapest. Rice is cheap. I just use Jasmine, buy it by the 4 kilo thing. Vegetables are cheap. I mean, like, you could probably, depending on yourself, get away with $70, $80 to feed yourself for 10 days based on these recommendations. That's the point, is like healthy food actually isn't that expensive. It's just more expensive per sitting. So when you go to McDonald's, you're like, oh, I can get a whole meal for $15. And it's like, my lunches for 2 weeks cost me $15. So, you know, like, that's something to consider. Something we can touch on briefly is like one of the notes I've got here is how to determine your macros. And that's important when you're dieting. A client said, and we hadn't set up her macros, we just set up her MyFitnessPal and like set it as a loss and really let her determine it. But she sent me it the other night and she was like, I did great. And she hit her macros and it was like 20% protein, 30% fat, and the 55, 60% carbs. And like, that's what MyFitnessPal gives you as a basis. I tend to flip it. But I think before we get into that, the most important thing you need to remember with macros is that the only macro that really matters is protein. It preserves muscle mass, it prevents lean tissue, it promotes satiety, elevates metabolism very, very slightly. But those are the benefits. But calories are what actually matter. So if you're in a calorie deficit, I always say protein should be at 1.5 to 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight. So all that means is you times your body weight by 1.5 to 2. Pretty much if you're at maintenance, 1.6. And if you're at in a deficit, 2 grams per kilo and maybe 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight. So if you're a 60 kilo girl, you want about 100 to 125, 30 grams of protein a day in a calorie deficit. And then really, how you dice up your macros beyond there is really up to you. Now, with beginners, I try not to overcomplicate things, so I will just say hit your protein, hit your calories, do whatever you want for carbs and fat. But there are reasons to optimize carbs over fat. So, carbs increase satiety, carbs provide glucose, which is the most readily available macronutrient for energy. And there are, well, actually, I was just listening to Jackson Pios and he was like, his diet break stuff actually like sort of blew this whole leptin increasing thing, at least with refeeds, out of the water. But there may be some evidence that keeping high calories reduces satiety at least. Increases satiety at least, and maybe has benefits on leptin and ghrelin and stuff like that. But whereas fat only serves as a health function, so you can get away with 0.5 grams per kilo of body weight as the absolute lowest. So if you're a 60 kilo girl, you want about, like the lowest you'd want to have in fat is 30. If I'm a 100 kilo guy, the lowest I'd want to have is 50. If you're not dieting, the recommendations are 0.5 to 1.5 grams per kilo of body weight for fat intake. But honestly, it's calories that is the determining factor. If your calories are maintenance at 3,000, then you may want to optimize and have 1.5 grams of fat per kilo. Some people report feeling a lot better on higher fat intakes. Some people do not. Whereas otherwise, you probably want to have, I usually try to keep my fat between the 0.5 to 1 gram per kilo when I'm not dieting. And when I am dieting, I take it down as low as possible. Like I'm 0.5, 0.6 grams per kilo body weight, because I want the satiety, increasing mechanisms of carbohydrate and protein, as well as the energy giving. So that's the thing as well, and that's what we're talking about with our diet hacks. When you're dieting, you're going to be low energy. You are necessarily taking in less energy than your body needs to maintain its current weight, and that's not a position your body likes to be in, so it doesn't make it pleasant for you. It's not like it's like, okay, you're eating enough, but we're going to really liberate those fat stores and all that kind of stuff to give you as much energy as you need, because your body is like, holy shit, I need to dip into my fat stores, something is wrong. And it's also just a clunky, slow process. Lipolysis is slow, and breaking down fat for energy is slow and shit. So, having carbohydrate, having protein, having caffeine, prioritizing those things within your calorie targets will maximize as much usable, fast energy that you can use easily. And that's why I always tell people, like, and it's very easy to overeat on fat. It's very easy to overeat on sugar. Sugar per se isn't bad. I always tell my clients who come in at 6 o'clock in the morning that they should have their favorite little lolly and a black coffee ready to go when they're dieting. So you wake up, mine would be a handful of Skittles. Like, you track it, you can weigh it if you want, but you can guesstimate. But I would have, like, you know, a small palm full of Skittles and a black coffee, a strong black coffee, and then I'd be off to training. That's where sugar is useful. Sugar as a snack, look, I have icy poles at night. 3 or 4 of those is okay within my calorie targets, even when dieting. But it's when you get into chocolates and lollies and those kind of things that sugar is very easy to overeat. So it is a tool to be used, but cautiously. Fat is very similar in the sense that foods that you would like, usually high processed sugar things like chocolate and those kind of things, and other things like potato chips and crisps and all those kind of things, high fat, moderate carbs, no protein, and high calorie. They're ultra processed, so there's no fiber, you don't get full from them. And that's where we just go like, fat isn't very satiating, so we want to minimize it within healthy constraints. But also, I don't like to, so the client who messaged me and told me she'd hit her macros and great, I started to write a thing to be like, well, actually, but I was like, no, good job. You hit rough protein and your carbs and fats, who gives a shit, and your calories were good. Great. So some of those things that as somebody gets more dieting experience, probably at least one 12-week block behind them, maybe multiple, that's when you probably want to start to really optimize those higher carb intakes and hitting protein and calorie goals. In the beginning, I found if you just go like, control this, do that, and the new person who's dieting is just trying to get through it is just like, what the fuck? So again, to recap, protein most important, no, calories most important, protein second important, and then I would say carbohydrate third and protein fat last. But honestly, calories, protein, and then as you see fit or as you can do, carbs, then fat. Usually aiming at about 20% intake of fat as your lowest intake, and you want about 30% intake from protein, and then the rest carbs, depending on your calories. MyFitnessPal I've got blogs on that if anybody needs me to send them specifically how to change their details in MyFitnessPal. But, you know, that's roughly the gist of it. What are we on? 20 minutes. I've got my last, I wanted to redo my vlog on tips to help with fat loss. And just because we've touched on that today, some things that you can think about with fat loss to help it. I think you really do need to accept that it is going to fucking suck. It's why we set a time frame, and that's another point here. Have a goal, have a time frame. Usually I limit people to 12 to 15 weeks, 12 to 16 weeks with deloads or refeeds or anything like that. But you want to have a 12 to 16 week goal where you sit down and you do an assessment, you take your photos and you set a goal and you set a rate of loss. Rates of loss are usually 0.5 to 1% of body weight per week. So if you're a 100 kilo guy, you want to lose 500 grams to a kilo, and it's also based on fat. If you're over the 20% for a guy and say 30% for a girl, 25% for a girl roughly, just if you have more body fat, you will set those losses more aggressively. But then again, that's also what you're capable of doing. I think a lot of people in the fitness industry, particularly in podcasts and stuff I listen to, and they're right to do so, just bandy about like, a 700 gram loss per week or something. It's like, that's, for your average overweight person, that is going to be a job. So setting a time frame, 0.5 to 1% of loss, 300 grams to 600 grams if you're a 60 kilo girl, and so on and so forth. And usually in your general population, you'll find you get the lower end of that. Or you'll get a 1 or 2 kilos in the first week and then it'll trail off. So you set that time frame, you set your goal, you set calories pretty assertive in the beginning. You have a time frame, and then you just accept that there are gonna be times when you're gonna be laying in bed and you're just like, I'm just fucking hungry. And if you don't have the mental fortitude, and I'm not saying fat loss is about willpower. This is why I educate on protein, having liquid calories, like liquid calorie-free drinks, dropping liquid calories, doing everything you can to increase satiety. This is why I educated you on that. We do not want fat loss to be about willpower or motivation, because I guarantee you, if you're working 30, 40 hours a week, far be it if you have mental health stuff on there, which really means you're working like a 70 or 90 hour week. And then you got training and all these kind of decision fatigue things. When you get to the end of the day, the last thing you're going to be able to do is white knuckle a hunger phase. So if you can set your calories around when you're hungry, set your calories to anticipate hunger. That's why getting ahead of it, having a big breakfast, having a moderate lunch, having a nice dinner, having your snacks pre-planned, and all that organization, when you back end that stuff. Myself and several of my clients, we wake up, first thing we do in the morning is just copy and paste our MyFitnessPal from the day before and make any changes based on the day. No decisions whatsoever. You just go, this is what I'm eating, it's food I enjoy, and that's why I also say cook food you enjoy. I adore my chili, curry, spaghetti, beef stroganoff meals. I love that shit. I could eat it for every meal, all the day. It's tasty. Every time I cook it at the office, everybody's like, that smells so delicious. And it's like, it's literally a 5-minute meal. I don't know why this is such a big deal for people. Having said that, I understand if you have kids and things like that, absolutely the rules are different. But I mean, like, even if you're married and no kids, go and buy 2 kilos of mince, 6 chili packets, 2 cans of 4-bean mix, and a can of diced tomatoes. Put it all in till it's brown. It's that easy. So now that I'm just talking shit, I've forgotten what I was my point. Accepting it will suck means making sure you have food at large quadrants of the day and you're not really walking around hungry, except other than between your next meals. Come on, Scooty. Come on, Scooty. Come on, Scooty boy. Accepting it will suck, but also making sure you've got your meals planned out so that you just have those breakfast, between breakfast and lunch, bit of hunger in there, big meal, between lunch and dinner, bit of hunger, meal there, and maybe a supper. Don't worry about eating before bed. It may be optimal to prioritize some calories earlier in the day just to certain hormonal things, but there's nothing that's like, if you're in a calorie deficit, you can eat all your calories before bed. If you're in an intermittent fasting for the whole day, it's not hugely important. I know I've covered a lot of stuff today. If you need clarification on anything else, do let me know. It's always just going to be on fat loss. I know not all of my clients are about fat loss, but it's just it's what the majority of the population, myself included, as you can see, is working on, because we live in an obesogenic environment. We live in a high calorie dense, low movement environment, high stress, high anxiety, mental illness, all that kind of stuff. So do not hesitate to give me any ideas, thoughts, criticisms, queries. Otherwise, I'll sign off now and good luck.